ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਲੀਡਰ ਆਫ ਆਫੀਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਆਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨ ਸਾਡੀ BC ਦੀ ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀ ਦੇ BC ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਲੀਡਰ ਆਨਰੇਬਲ ਜੌਨ ਰਸਟੈਡ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨਗੇ। Mr. Rustad, good morning and welcome to show.
Thank you, Harjit. Very nice to be back on your program.
After about 6 months.
Oh, I know. It's been a long time. Of course, there's been a lot of things that have happened over that period of time.
Yes.
But you made me promise saying that if I'm going to come in, I needed to give you a block of time, not just 5 minutes. And so I said, yes, I would make sure that I would do that.
Yeah, that was a little tussle on phone. When you say 5 minutes, I say, no, 5 minutes doesn't serve. Let me very clear, Mr. Premier was here before election. He was here having tea with my colleagues and my management, and he said, I have 10 minutes. I said, Mr. Premier, sorry, in 10 minutes, I can't do anything. You know, I need something out of it, and you must sit with me for some time, so at least we can serve our listeners. Very fair.
Well, it's part of this is a conversation.
Yes.
We need to understand, where people are coming from, being able to have that, and I think that's an important piece of people getting to know who you are and what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Yes. So how was election? Because we didn't meet after election. I left for Punjab for demise of my father, and we couldn't meet on your campaign trail. How was it?
Well, I got to say, it was interesting. I mean, it was, we were building the plane as we were flying when the Conservative Party, we took a party that had 0 seats and 2% support to almost forming government and winning 44 seats in the legislature. Mm-hmm. We were just short of forming government. But, when I think back on it, it's remarkable what we were able to achieve in such a short period of time, and the support that we had, particularly with the Indo-Canadian community, the Chinese community, but with so many different communities around the province, was just remarkable. Mm-hmm. Because, many people had never voted Conservative before in their lives, but they were looking for that hope and optimism. Mm-hmm. Is there lessons learned? Certainly there's things that I would love to be able to do different. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we are still in a building phase of the Conservative Party of British Columbia. And so it's quite an achievement what we've done, and we're still growing from here.
Mm-hmm. So you were sitting as an MLA from long time, and still you love North. You don't want to leave North and flying every weekend to North. And that's why you are still fresh. I wanted to give you compliment. And how is now, as a leader of official opposition, what are different duties now?
Well, it's quite different. First of all, obviously, they're very long days. Mm-hmm. Your average day when the legislature sittings, 12 to 14 hours a day. Because you're in early in the morning, you're trying to get things set up for the day, you're doing meetings, you're doing the various duties that you need to do in the house, phone calls, and often there's, it's 8:30 at night when I'm finally leaving, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night when I'm finally leaving the building and heading home for the night. So long days when the legislature's sitting. When the legislature's not sitting, of course, it's a lot of travel. Mm-hmm. Trying to get around to various areas around the province, for example, getting out to the Kootenays or into the Okanagan, traveling on the island, all these various areas that you need to be able to get to. And of course, spending a lot of time in the Lower Mainland, places like Surrey and Richmond. Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Rustad, I was there other day with my team of Sarvada Pala, and thank you for that. You acknowledged us. I noticed that was my first time in any house from last 16 years in broadcasting. I was sitting there and noticed once you all got back after lunch and give some acknowledgement from your all constituents, some guests were there. Then there was a question period, and for half an hour, you're as a opposition, your all members were asking different questions, but those were not answered as they were asked.
Yeah.
They were dodging it. Why it was like that? They are there, the majority is there to serve the British Columbians. You are there to put them proper in a place for the British Columbians. Why they were not answering?
Well, you always have to remember that it's called question period. It's not called answer period. Mm-hmm. And so this is something that's very unfortunate because they don't have to answer. So, for example, you could ask them, what time did the sun rise? Mm-hmm. And they could say, aren't the stars pretty today? and it's perfectly legitimate for them to do that. It's not right from my perspective because the whole purpose of question period is to drill down on issues, to make sure that you're holding government to account.
Yes.
And they can just dodge it and talk about anything they want to talk about. Estimates is a little different. It gives you an ability to go into more details, and it's more expected to get more answers. But of course, that's not covered, and it's not the theater or not the drama that you get, the conflict of question period.
4 of your MLAs from up north, 2 Okanagan, 2 Kootenays, 2 Lower Mainland asked same question about the crime and safety of British Columbians. El Nostroco just put a crime scene, how the 2 were fighting with the butcher knives, and someone from Prince George asked it, and from the Castle Guard asked the same question, but those were not answered at all.
Yeah, and this is the challenge. We did this on healthcare too, and we did particularly it was a day focused just on Surrey and all the issues associated with Surrey, including the Fraser Health and the CEO of Fraser Health, or not CEO, the president of Fraser Health, who is a political insider for the NDP and has created huge problems, of course, in Fraser Health Authority. But when it comes to things like crime, we have these examples in every community around the province, and we're looking for, what is the government actually trying to do? How are they trying to address this? What is it that their plan is? And they haven't, unveiled anything. You look in their budget and they say, we're hiring more police. Well, the number of police they're hiring is simply to match the number of police that are retiring. They're not actually adding capacity. In some places they are. The one key piece that's needed was to expand the training as part of the training that we provide here in British Columbia. That's an important piece, particularly when you look at policing in Surrey and the fact that they need to hire more police. But you look at their whole budget and their whole plan. It's just a continuation of the failures that they've been doing for the last 8 years.
If I get to the Surrey and the Fraser Health Authorities and all these things, before I want to get there lately, the government wants special authority for a Bill 7, you called. And what is that? Why you are opposing that?
So what's happening, of course, with south of the border with the tariffs that the U.S. are putting on Canada, that's going to have a negative impact. And so we need to be able to make sure we look after people in British Columbia. We need to make sure that we have the ability to be able to push back on these tariffs. Every jurisdiction in the country, all the other provinces, all the other territories are doing just that. British Columbia, for whatever reason, David Eby wants ultimate power. He wants complete and total dictatorship in this province. He's asked for unlimited power to do anything he wants for 2 years without having to go to the legislature, without any sort of scrutiny, without asking for permission to spend as much as he wants, to do everything he can. No other jurisdiction in Canada is doing this. No other province is doing this. So David Eby is asking for this kind of authority to deal with what's coming from the U.S., and you would argue that all the other provinces are actually more vulnerable than British Columbia because we have more diversified trade, and yet he wants this kind of authority. It is a complete overreach that he wants, this authoritarian approach, and we're going to do everything we can to try to stop it. And I'll give me a couple examples. Sorry about carrying on, but this bill gives them the ability to access your private information, any information they want, and use it for whatever purpose they want. This bill allows them to bring in tolls or road pricing or anything else and be able to do it without any kind of scrutiny, without any kind of plan or oversight. It gives them the ability to change any piece of legislation they want. And this is an extreme example, but it's an example of what they could potentially do. So they have right now a vacant property tax. So if you've got a second home and you're not renting it out, you get charged a tax. Well, with a stroke of the pen, they could say if you have a vacant room, they can charge you a tax on it if you aren't renting out that room. I mean, that's an extreme example, but this bill gives them the authority to do that without any scrutiny or questioning in the legislature.
Anything he wants?
Anything he wants.
In British Columbia.
That's correct.
Whatever he wants to change, whatever he wants to modify, whatever he wants to impose, without asking official opposition or get to legislation, he can do whatever he wants.
That's right. And then he'll just have to report back a couple times a year and just carry on with as much spending as he wants. Think about it. We're now in an $11 billion deficit, and he wants to be able to have unlimited spending authority over and above what he's doing. That's what he is asking the legislature to give him. And worst part of this is, so we've got this fight with the Americans, and it's something that we need to push back, we need to fight, but we are in a vulnerable position as British Columbia. Matter of fact, we've never been more vulnerable. Close to half the food we consume comes from the United States.
Yes.
All of the jet fuel that we need for Vancouver Airport
Finland,
comes from the United
Ferndale,
States.
yes.
20 to 30% of the electricity we consume comes from the United States. 60% of the gasoline and diesel we have, most of that comes from the United States because we don't produce what we need here.
Yes.
We are incredibly vulnerable, and the Americans know it. And so David Eby's trying to do what? I mean, he's trying to poke these guys in the eye. We need to be able to diversify and come at a position of strength to deal with the Americans fairly in terms of trade. But we are in an incredibly weak position, and David Eby, with what he's trying to do here, is only going to make matters worse.
No, that is, I wanted to elaborate this more. And if this is for the tariff, he can ask particularly some sort of things. And for if you are sitting there across the aisle, you are there also for British Columbians. You are not there for sitting for USA, and you are also in favor to keep us protected and to take care for us. But asking for the total authority to do anything and just notify you and British Columbians pretty much saying what he wants to do and don't have to get passed through the legislation. This is not democracy.
Well, the thing is, he could do anything he wants, and 6 months later, he'll tell you what he did. You don't even get to know what he's doing. He can just pass and do whatever he wants. That's what the authority that he's asking for. It's absolutely crazy. I would expect something like this from a communist regime. I would not expect something like this from a democratic province of British Columbia. It's unbelievable what this man is trying to do, and I suspect he's doing it because he himself is frustrated. He just wants to do whatever he wants to do and then leave. That's not democracy. That is not what we need as a society. And so we're going to push back as hard as we can on this.
So how you can do it? You don't have enough votes to stop it.
Well, we don't by ourselves, but obviously we're going to be looking for allies in the legislature to try to find a way to be able to modify or to stop this from going forward. We are going to be asking the public. We've got a petition going. We're asking people to sign to say, do not take our democracy away. We actually want our democracy in this province. We are going to continue to try to ask people to put as much pressure as they can on MLAs. And in the House, we're going to use every tool we can to drag this thing out and make it as difficult as possible for this piece of legislation to pass.
It is a democratic to elect a MLA, whether you vote for NDP or you vote for Conservative or you vote for Green. You are our representative sitting there. My representative, my constituency is sitting there. Trapper is sitting there. But if he get all the authority, there's no need for any MLAs there, even from his party.
That's right. It just all gets centered on one person, which is David Eby, in terms of what the NDP are doing. And I think there's probably even NDP MLAs that are uncomfortable with this. But this is the reality of what David Eby thinks he should be doing, and it goes to the very character that he is. I mean, he lied all the way through the campaign. He's lied about so many things. He promised $1,000 rebate. He's backed down on that. He's lied about all these stuff. And you want to give somebody that's for that comfortable lying that kind of authority and power? I mean, this is absolute insanity to think this is what the NDP believe they need to do here in British Columbia.
And what are other issues you noticed from this? Is the first time you just said there, they opened the House, and what are other issues lurking around British Columbians? What do you want to just elaborate more?
So, there's a number of things that we want to push. And so, for example, one of the big things we need to do associated with Donald Trump and what's going on south of the border is we actually need to take down the trade barriers in our own country. Mm-hmm. The barriers that we have is the equivalent of a 23% tariff on British Columbia. Like, this is crazy. We need to think of ourselves as Canadians and strengthen our economy. So we actually introduced a piece of legislation following on what Nova Scotia did, which is a reciprocal piece of legislation. It says that if you take down your trade barriers, we'll take down ours. Well, let's open up free mobility and trade across our provinces. Mm-hmm. And David Eby doesn't want to do that. So what he's saying is he wants to be able to pick and choose which items that he wants to be able to open up trade on. He doesn't want to get rid of the full controls, which is just wrong. We shouldn't have these things in the first place. So that's a piece of legislation we brought forward. Another thing we did is most people don't realize that we ship 18 million tons of thermal coal a year through the Port of Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And all of that comes from the United States. They're shipping all the coal up through Vancouver because the West Coast ports in the United States don't want to ship thermal coal. we could put a carbon tax on that coal that's being shipped out of British Columbia and use that as leverage to try to get a deal on things like softwood lumber. And that's the key piece. If we're going to be working with the Americans and looking for solutions, we need to be able to have leverage. We need to be able to get our products, to Tidewater instead of having to ship it to the States. We need to be able to expand our markets. We need to be able to trade within Canada to strengthen who we are and fulfill that real dream that is what British Columbia should be. And then we can sit down and negotiate with the United States and say, hey, you know what? You're our greatest trading partner. We want to be able to work fairly with you, but we have other partners if you don't want our goods. And that gives us some strength, and we don't have that today.
When I open lines to check about or inquire about carbon tax, people send me their all BC and the Fortis BC bills. The gas charges, cost of gas is $99. BC carbon tax is $180. Where this money is going? The carbon tax we are paying on the gasoline, on the terrorism gas, where it goes, in which funds they go.
So it's just going into general revenue, and it's just being spent, right, in terms of it. This is why the whole carbon tax needs to go. It's a job-killing carbon tax. And what David Eby is proposing to do is they say they want to get rid of the consumer tax, but then they want to significantly increase the tax on businesses. And saying that they're the bigger polluters. Well, they're not the bigger polluters, but that's what they want to do. All that's going to do is pass it down to consumers. On April 1st, the carbon tax is expected to go up by 20%. That'll be the equivalent today, at the pump, between that carbon tax and the low carbon fuel emission standard, which is another carbon tax.
Yes.
We're going to be paying close to 38 cents a liter in just carbon taxes.
Oh.
And so he says he's going to get rid of the consumer tax, but if he's going to crank up the taxes on businesses, they're just going to pass it on, and you're still going to be paying the same price. All he's going to do is hide the tax. And that, to me, is wrong. This is a job-killing tax. It's hurting affordability. It just needs to go. There's no rationale for keeping it whatsoever.
And for the healthcare services, every day there is a news that emergency is closed in this city, and this city, and this city. You have some stats on that, about the doctors and our facility and how it goes?
In the first 2 months of this year, there was, I think, 140 some odd emergency room closures in the province.
Yes.
I mean, in one of the communities in my riding, Burns Lake, it's being closed 25% of the time. 25% of the time, 1 out of every 4 days, it is not available to people in terms of emergencies. So what do? You schedule when you're going to have an emergency? In Surrey, I was talking to the emergency room doctors there. The average wait time now, or the length of wait time now, can be in Surrey up to 18 hours. And what they're anticipating is by the end of this year, without any changes, it'll be 24 hours. That's basically 100% diversion. You have to wait a day just to get into emergency. It's absolute insanity to think this is what we should accept. And the NDP stand up in the legislature and say, we don't want to bring in American-style healthcare. I agree with them. Yet they're the ones who are actually using American-style healthcare to provide services. They're buying services in the States. They're paying for special services through a private side within British Columbia. Yet you as the public have no opportunity or access. This is just wrong. The European models are far superior in terms of how we should deal with healthcare. It's universal healthcare, just like we have today, but it's much superior in terms of delivery. Yet he's not willing to do any changes. And so I look at Surrey. So they're putting a new hospital in Cloverdale, which is good. That's needed. They say they're going to do the expansion of the tower, but that's still many, many years away. We need a children's hospital in Surrey. We don't have any of these services south of the Fraser. It's crazy why Surrey is continually being treated as a second-class city, especially when it comes to healthcare.
Yes, and healthcare professionals, our trained nurses, our doctors are working in an Uber or any industry other than the healthcare industry. They are trained in India. From here, British Columbians fly to Punjab to get their knee surgery. And when the doctors and nurses came from there and get immigration in this country, they can't work as a doctor and nurses.
Yeah.
I don't know what is the difference.
It's crazy, and I've told this story before about a couple,
yes,
husband and wife team. They moved here from India to practice, and she was a general practitioner and he was a surgeon, and it took them 4 years for the first one to qualify. So they decided the wife would go through the process. The husband took on a labor job and then would go back to India for 6 months of the year to do surgeries.
Yes.
To keep up his skills on that side. After 4 years, now she's qualified to become a general practitioner in British Columbia. Now it's his turn to go through 4 years. 8 years it took for these two professionals to be able to practice. There's a professional today, a doctor from Ukraine, who wants to be able to practice in British Columbia. He's moved here, fleeing the war in Ukraine, which was absolutely horrific what's been going on there. He's in Abbotsford. He says, okay, I want to practice in British Columbia. He's not allowed unless he writes the exam. He says, I don't have the money to write the exam. Well, too bad. That's the response that government's had. And it's so wrong that you would have these professionals that are qualified, that are capable, and that are not being utilized.
Another thing, communities are concerned about the drugs. Drugs, the now system allows 2.5 gram of synthetic drug. Anyone can have it with the pilot project, which is going till January 2026. And that very lethal. If they got fentanyl, the 2 milligram of a fentanyl can kill anyone. Overdose deaths are there. And why they are keeping all those policies? What they wanted to prove on that synthetic drugs to the teenagers and youngsters, they can have it and they can roam anywhere in Surrey.
This is a real tragedy when you look at the policies that the NDP has done in British Columbia, whether it's a safe supply, and the fact now it's been proven those safe supply drugs are going into organized crime. They're being resold to kids in our schools. They're being resold outside of our borders, even across into the United States. Safe supply has been an absolute disaster. But decriminalization is similar. You're taking tools away from police and allowing people to be able to use these products. These products are deadly. And for whatever reason, the NDP has made a decision that they believe it is better that the addicts get these drugs and continue to stay high, as opposed to putting that effort and focus on trying to give them treatment and recovery. There's one of the most effective treatment and recovery programs is abstinence-based, where, if somebody says, okay, I'm done, I want off of drugs, you put them in a program where you deal with the immediate addiction, but then on the recovery side is abstinence-based. You keep them away from the drugs and you support them and allow them to be able to recover and to be able to have full lives. NDP won't fund a single one of these. They refuse to put funding towards this, and yet this is the highest the highest percentage of people being successful in terms of being treated in recovery. NDP won't fund it. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. They seem to think the best approach is just to give people drugs. And it's one of the things that they're calling these low barrier housing projects as like their treatment. There's no treatment. Drugs, people are going in there. The drugs are flowing in the community, or they're flowing in these facilities. Even anybody that wants to recover is now in an environment where there's open drug use and drugs right there. It almost makes it impossible for these people to succeed, not to mention all the crime that goes around it in terms of communities. This approach, we need housing for people, but unless you can deal with the addictions and the mental health problems that go with it, all you're doing is distributing the problems to more and more communities and more areas around the province.
Resident of Surrey was fighting from last 2 years to keep bitch police, the color of uniform. And we paid millions dollars for both forces. One was in the favor, another was not. And finally, Surrey RCMP, Surrey police is on driver's seat now. But crime is there. Our two mothers, the grandparents, were walking in the Fraser Height, in the Cedar Hill area. Their golden chain were snatched. The car stopped by. They got their chains and flew. This was a beautiful country. When I moved 27 years ago, we never locked our cars. We never locked our doors. And where we are heading to? What is the reason of that? You are in the politics from years and years. You come from one of the safest community in up north. What's happening in this metropolitan cities?
Yeah, it's a real tragedy to see this, and it's because we've taken such a soft on crime approach.
Yes.
That in many instances, the government seems to be more concerned about the rights of the criminal than they do on the rights of the victim. And this is really sad when you look at it. And so we've seen this sort of crime, proliferating like everywhere around the province. This is one of the reasons why when we ran on the campaign, we said, look, what we need to do is create a separate track for these, particularly for these prolific offenders. police tell me 20% of the offenders are committing 80% of the crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So let's deal with getting these people off the streets, getting them into the courts in a rapid way, and getting them, the punishment that is deserving for them, getting them out of our society so that people can feel safe again in our society.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a whole plan about how you expand the courts, how you deal with Crown prosecution, how you have this fast track for these individuals that are these prolific offenders, as well as on the mental health side, because much of this is also dealing with mental health and addiction. And if you aren't addressing those components, if the judge is just saying, well, they have a mental health issue, we're not going to put them in jail. Wait a second here. These people are committing crimes, and they're continually committing crimes, and they're a danger to society. Why would we do that?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be able to have this treatment inside of things. And once again, the NDP has been, virtually silent on being able to do anything. Worse, they're actually gaslighting the people in the province. What they're saying is, we're expanding opportunities, we're expanding what they call secure care. No, they aren't. It's facilities that are already there, associated with pretrial and that side of things. They're not dealing with the mental health issues that we have and we're seeing on the streets on a day-to-day basis.
And above everything, Mr. Rustad, now it starts haunting the community when politicians start to look on our bedrooms and our washrooms. Friend of mine called me yesterday evening. His grade 11 daughter didn't use washrooms for a whole day in school. This gender neutral washrooms, this is hassle for our daughters. The boys can get in there, no one can stop there because it's gender neutral washroom. Any gender can use it. And they say that we are just sort of trans, we are in boy's body, we have thoughts like a woman. And why who gave these politicians special permission to just mandate those things in our lives? I don't understand this.
Well, this to me is something that I'm also very confused on. Why is it that we're taking away the rights of women to have safe places?
Yes.
I mean, women, particularly a young daughter, maybe they're just experiencing a period for the first time,
Yes.
And they're going through changes, and they don't want guys hanging around, right? They need to be able to have safe places. Similarly, if you're going into a washroom, I've heard this story over and over again.
Yes.
Parents, 12-year-old daughter doesn't want to use the washroom, holds it, waits to the end of the day, runs home to go to the washroom.
Yes.
Because they don't feel safe in washrooms. This is not right. We should make sure that as a society we protect women's rights. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be also considering trans rights. They should have their places as well.
Obviously, we respect everyone.
But we should be able to, you shouldn't be taking away the rights of women to be able to give the rights to another person. You should be able to make sure that they have the rights. That's why last year I moved forward a piece of legislation that says safety for women and girls in sports. Women should not have to compete against biological men in sports. So this is certainly changes that we need in our society, but it stems the same thing with the SOGI program that's going on, the sexualization of kids in our schools. This is just wrong. And now they're saying they're doing a review of material that's available in schools, and it's the bureaucrats are going to make some sort of decision. And I asked the question of the Premier. I said, why would you have the bureaucrats? It's parents that should be making the decision about whether material is appropriate in schools or not. And the Premier would refuse to even answer the question. He went on some other tyrant. It's just, to me, it's completely unacceptable that we should not be respecting parents and parental rights and protecting women and girls in our schools.
Yeah, even though the SOGI flag bearer MLAs lost their seats, but still they are saying SOGI is right, then you do whatever you want to do. At least give freedom and respect to our daughters. They should have their own washroom, and trans, they have their own washroom. They can use there. They can't enter our daughters' washrooms. We don't allow it.
Yeah.
And that's what the concern is. I wanted to pass it to you. And the Bill 7, at last, I wanted to elaborate that more, and how British Columbians can enter in a plea or come with you to stop that. This is a sort of authoritarian law we are going towards, and giving power to only one person who is premier. He can do whatever he wants, and he will notify British Columbians in 6 months' time that I did this, I did this. As you are telling, that is in the Bill 7. So, what normal person can do for the Bill 7?
Well, go to the conservativebc.com website. We have a petition. We're going to be circulating that in our offices. We're going to be going around, collecting signatures around the province, demanding that this bill be withdrawn. And so it's an important piece to get people engaged and involved. We're going to continue to be that voice. We're going to actually look at the idea of holding town rallies and around the province. We're going to continue to push back against this bill. But I think the thing that people need to think about mostly is, do you think democracy is worth fighting for? Because I do. I believe democracy is at the core of who we are as a society. Mm-hmm. And that's why, I'm so disturbed by the irregularities I've seen with the Elections Act and how this last election was unfolded. But this is an important piece. People should do everything they can to protect our democracy in British Columbia. Mm. Many people that have come to this province, both in recent years as well as in the decades before, fled jurisdictions that did not have strong democracy, that saw corruption or communism, that took away people's rights. And now we are seeing that same thing here. Another thing that's very disturbing, this government hid things, for example, like the agreement in Sechelt and what's going on in Haida Gwaii and the attack on private property rights. Under this bill, your private property rights could be completely removed if he deems that's important in terms of some sort of response. Like, this is how draconian this bill is, which is why people should be very concerned about this and get engaged.
Mm-hmm. And another thing I wanted to pass it to you, our community is, they respect you, your leadership. You were at 5%, then all 6 or 7 candidates jumped to your train. Some of got the seats, but Tegjot Wale, Yishan Wala, Hanur Randawa lost their seats with some margin. And you are giving them respect. They are always around you whenever you go to anywhere. That is one of the compliments I wanted to pass on to you. Otherwise, any politicians, it happened with me in 2019. I lost. I was calling my leader for 2 years. He never picked my phone. and he came to my house on that time that here's, please fight from my side. No one wants to get in front of this liberal leader. So this is one of the compliments I wanted to pass on. Our big Khalsa Day parade is coming on April 12th and 19th. I hope you will be there with us and meet more British Columbians, more my community people, and let's get together and let's work for our province. Whether you are across the aisle, whether the ruling party, we give fair chance to everyone who wants to pass on their message. And thank you so much for joining us, and any message at last.
So first of all, I very much look forward to Vaisakhi coming up, yes, as well as on Saturday of next week, Sikh Heritage Month. I plan to be able to be down here and involved in that. My only message I would say to the people in Surrey and to the listeners here is thank you so much for your support. We have always said that Surrey is going to be the battleground of that last election. It'll be the battleground going forward. Mm-hmm. It is wrong that Surrey has been treated as a second-class city for too long. We will continue to fight and to grow and to be in the community engaging with people so that they have a better chance to get to know us and we can make sure we bring forward those concerns. That's who we are as a Conservative Party, and I just want to say thank you to the people who have put their trust in us, and we will continue to work hard to bring that hope and opportunity for people in British Columbia.
You're born and brought up in very organic community. That's what we are. We have very much same heritage. And please stay with the grassrooters. Listen to those who work very hard, meet and greet those, and get their message. The elites who have money, they can jump any party. They have their own money. And they can enjoy anywhere. You and I, we are all hardworking British Columbians. And you're in good path. I say very best for you, your family. In advance, happy Khalsa Day and Baisakhi to you, and wish you very best.
Thank you so much. Thank you again for having me on. I'm glad we got a chance to do a long-form chat. I very much enjoy being able to have these kind of conversations.
Thank you so much.
Take care.